looking at Stephen Williams here, a digital as far as I'm concerned, expert. And I know that we have a number of those types of capacities in Barbados. So therefore, if CBC is too lazy or too indifferent, or whatever word you wish to use, to be doing the kind of broadcasting that will allow all of Barbados to follow these types of sporting events, then the private sector has lots of room to enter the space and to play. And therefore, it is possible to digitally stream many of these events. Now, we know because it's shutting down VOB from 12 o'clock. We know because the stadium is full of keen parents. We know because when it is on radio, everybody in the business place is listening to whether St. Michael's School winning or whether some other school is winning. We know this. So therefore, the digital streaming is something that people are interested in. Can we not have pay-to-play for the digital stream so that we know we have a pool of Barbadians out there who are rearing and ready to go? And if we have done so well against the region, should we not be thinking along these lines next year of bragging rights being exercised sufficiently to provoke Jamaicans to want to listen to what we are doing here and to pay to play? And some of these are the difficult, well, I don't think they're difficult, some of these are just the decisions that we have to be prepared to make and to exercise our initiative to do. And this is not about government. And I think part of the problem is we've been very laid back and wait on government to do that which we've seen the rest of the world doing without reference to government at all. And I want to say that perhaps what government may have to do is to have a serious word with our teachers, because it defies my understanding why on earth we would want to have the little children at knapsack and then at BSAC as well, running their hearts out in boiling hot sun, 12 o'clock races running, 2 o'clock fellow running a 400 meters, breaking records. Can you imagine what he'd be doing at 7 or 8 at night? The stadium that they were running at has lights. And as we go to the brand new national stadium in 2028 it is, I would want to hope that we would move a lot of these finals into the evening time where we would enable more people to participate as we go forward. I feel that beyond that, there is an issue that a few people may have a difficulty with, but I am prepared to go there. Let us face some realities. Our athletes now, some of them, especially as you said, Connie, coming back from Carifta, have tremendous name and image and likeness recognition. In the United States, there are at least 40, maybe 45 states which have actually passed legislation to allow amateur athletes to use their names, their images, and their likenesses for monetary purposes. Yes, you can build in some guardrails to make sure that gambling and so on doesn't take place, and you're building guardrails to make sure that there's not a lot of vice creeping into sports at that level. But you're allowing the young people to exercise a financial right and to own and to demonstrate ownership by the law now being in place. Now, what are the advantages? I think that if we have a top quarter miler who is able then to go into a partnership, let us say, with a car dealership, and they have some sort of snazzy, I do not know, but anyhow, obviously the quarter miler got speed and the car dealership got selling cars that got speed, and you want to build that relationship between the two of them. But he gets an opportunity to put some money in his pocket, maybe a lump sum or maybe over a period of time. But that enables him to be in a position where he doesn't have, as some of our Olympic athletes have had to do, walk from business house to business house in Barbados with hand extended, begging for a little bit of help. And that can't be beyond us to achieve that. And I want to go further because Minister will have summer camps soon, and I honestly feel that there's nothing wrong with having some of our top athletes being able to have some of the skills demonstrated and shared and the experiences shared during the course of our summer camps, and let it be for a fee. But we have to be prepared to be sufficiently creative to allow for these things to happen. And I don't only say this now because I'm here. When I was tourism minister, I had it out with the BTMI. And to be honest with you, it was during COVID. And I could not understand what was the difficulty of us being able to sell Barbados during COVID when everybody in Chicago penned up in an apartment. Everybody in Birmingham penned up in an apartment. But we have a man called Sir Garfield Sobers, who is known across the world. West Indians all around the world. People all through England. And if we simply use the digital platforms to say, this is Sir Gary, and Sir Gary is now going to talk to some of the youngsters in England about the do's and don'ts of being a good batsman, the do's and don'ts of preparing for a match, the do's and don'ts of whatever. And you do it for a fee, and people pay to play. And I couldn't understand the thing. My little son then, I said, well, Kofi, if you were given the opportunity, Dad, I don't care how much money it costs, you would have to do it for me. And I think that's what every son would tell every father in Great Britain or in Australia or wherever we are trying to sell. So it is not that we don't have the ability. I think we just haven't been using the initiative. It's not that we don't have the opportunity, we just haven't been grasping it. And I think that is probably because we have been very laid back, and a lot of the things that we have done have been traditionally very government reliant, government dependent, and government cannot do it all. But if we want to lift this business of sports to a point where it is really seen as what it should be, a monetized revenue earning opportunity for ordinary people, then I think that it is vitally important that we do that. The concept of going into the virtual space and being interactive, the concept of inviting people to pay to participate, things that is an idea that its time has come. Others are doing it, and I see really no reason why we should be finding it difficult. The other point I want to make is that we talk about financial literacy, and we talk about developing our young people, as though these are concepts that are disassociated from this issue. Every youngster who has a chance to sell or use his image, his name under contract, learns a little bit about some of the fundamentals of later on in his career as an athlete. He will learn about what a contract should and should not have in. He will learn how to protect the very name that he is selling. He will learn that he has to double check behind the people who he is working with to make sure that the money he is earning is being deposited and looked after appropriately. And let us not pretend that these are not real things, because the great Usain Bolt lost a fortune, and several others of lesser ability than him lost fortunes. So that I think that, again, it is part of the developmental trajectory that enables us to take a youngster at age 15, 16, 17 and prepare him, if he's truly going to be a global talent, prepare him for what he will confront at age 23, 24, 25. And if he ain't prepared at 15, 16, 17, then he's in deep, deep trouble when he is at 23, 24, 25, confronting these things for the first time. So again, I leave that with you. And the last point I suppose I want to make is simply this, that I took some youngsters from my constituency to Test cricket, Paul. They sat in the stand and they chanted, Jaden Seal, as he turned to run in. And as he going faster and faster, they're chanting louder and louder. Boys and girls, they were completely enamored with the idea of being up close and personal to what they perceived as one of the best fast bowlers that the West Indies had. I say what they perceive because you and I come from a different generation, and I don't want to speak further to that. Our experience is a little different. But the fact of the matter is that as they left the stadium, again, there was nothing to take away. They had gone and seen what they saw was a childhood hero. But we grew up in an era where your childhood heroes, unfortunately, were not all Caribbean people. For the Caribbean people, you couldn't get in the cards. But those who were overseas, you actually could collect cards. The Americans collect baseball cards and other sporting cards and so on. And for every one of them, you ain't just getting it, you buy it. And I'm saying that, there are ways in which we can creatively enter the space. And I feel that part of our problem really has been that we have been a little bit too laid back. And we've been too content to say we're too small or find some other justification why we can't do it too. And I genuinely believe that that is really where the problem is. Yes, size is going to be a challenge. It will always be. But I think a lot of it has to do with our ambition and our ability to, or our willingness to see the world as it really is, and to realize that in entertainment as well as in sports, we have untapped minefields of opportunity. And if it is that we are accepting, as we should, that our greatest resource is our human resource, then we have to use that as a strategic asset in national development. And if we're going to use it as a strategic asset of national development, then I think that there can be no limitations applied as to the span of opportunity that we should be prepared to take. Now, as I said, I think government obviously would have to hear from the people of Barbados on their feelings about young athletes using their name, image, and likeness. For Kerry Simmons, it could happen tomorrow, and I would fight that battle. But obviously, I am not in a position to say it must happen tomorrow. But I think it is something that we should be thinking about, because we empower our young athletes across the board, not just in cricket or in swimming or track and field or what have you. But we empower them now to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and to start to finance a future for themselves in a discipline that should then become more than just a passion pursuit, but rather become an opportunity to earn a living. And again, I just use what we already know as examples. There are 18-year-olds that belong to Manchester United or Manchester City, and they are earning, in some cases, unspeakable amount of pounds when the week comes. And when you take an 18-year-old, 20-year-old, and pay him £20 million a week, the reality is that don't just happen overnight. That is as a result of a lot of effort that he has put in. We have youngsters down here who cannot benefit as they do because the country is small and the government cannot provide the level of resources for sports development that some of them can in other countries. The country is small and the clubs are small. They don't have the level of sporting finance development. But what we can do is to ensure that there are market opportunities that the people of the region, the people of the Caribbean, and the people here in Barbados, first and foremost, can be allowed to create for our young people so that they have access to income that they might not otherwise have. And that income becomes developmental opportunity income for the advancement of their journey through the sporting career. And I do not know if that has strategically framed it, but I do think that I have shared with you what I sense as one of the major weaknesses in the approach that we have. And as I said, I don't know that we are going to reinvent a wheel in this discussion, but I think that we can use the opportunities that we know already exist and to use them wisely so that we give all of our athletes, irrespective of what the discipline may be, the very best possible chance for their own development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior Minister Simmons. We will take your support. We will take your support. I listen very carefully when the policymakers speak. We will take your support. We will move swiftly to our next speaker, who happens to be the featured speaker. He will frame, from his perspective, Minister Simmons spoke about understanding value, right? Being able to communicate value. And Revelino Simmons, who is the principal of Digital Shark TV, will share with you some of the truths about unlocking the untapped value of sport in Barbados. Join me in welcoming Revelino Simmons. While Riv gets set up, allow me to correct. The name of the ministry is the Ministry of Energy, Business Development, and Consumer Affairs. All right, so thank you very much for that.
Good evening all. Protocol having been established, I'll move ahead into my presentation. I'll look at it from a different angle. I've been involved in broadcasts for probably 35 years. The last 10, 15 years I've been involved with sport in many angles: distribution, broadcast rights, everything else. Let me just pull up my presentation. Okay. Who really owns the game? Unlocking the untapped value of sports in Barbados. I'm representing Digital Shark Inc. and Co-op Cable Inc. today. One company handles a lot of distribution from Caribbean, Barbados, Cricket West Indies, Africa. We've done NBA across Africa. We've done, we're now working on the Nigerian Premier League. Okay. When we ask who owns the game, most think athletes, association, club, fans, sponsors, or broadcasters. All of them matter, but the deeper question is, who understands where the value in sports sits? And who has the structure, the knowledge, and the courage to unlock it? In Barbados and across the Caribbean, we do not suffer from a shortage of talent, sporting culture, or passion. What we often suffer from is a shortage of commercial structure. And this has been so forever. We treat, as something to be funded or celebrated, but it can also build, packaged, licensed, promoted, distributed, analyzed, and scaled. Sports has so many aspects and directions we can take it in. Sports is bigger than the match. A sporting event's creative value far beyond what happens on the field. The match is only a part of the business. The real value often sits around the match, in how it's packaged, distributed, sold, how many markets can be reached. Rights and distribution, streaming, highlights, archives, international licensing, commercial inventory, sponsors, advertising, pay-per-view, ticket sales, on-air branding, data and analytics, And I'll go into a lot of these aspects. I'll walk you through examples, real-world examples that we've experimented with for the past 10, 15 years. Okay, about 10 to 12 years ago, I was working with a group of guys, and they decided to do an MMA league in Barbados. I said, wow, different, that's different. We managed to do a first event. I took the event, I edited it, I packaged it. Flow Sports was just coming onto the market at the time. And they offered us 100,000 US for it. Guess what? The guys never took it. They did not understand the business of sports. If they had taken that, it was just one event they had to do per month. They did not understand that the value, it was not just about the licensing deal. There was merchandising, sponsorship. They wanted it to hop from island to island. Sponsors on the ground in each country. There were so many different aspects. Fighters development, moving fighters from this league into the MMA, and a whole load of different aspects. So we have to understand what we have. Associations have to understand what they have and what they could commercialize and how to look at it. That was the first opportunity lost. Carifta swimming, all right. We managed to get the rights for Carifta swimming at no cost. Just because it was no cost, it doesn't mean there wasn't any value. We did something pretty different at the time. Most times, a production company would come, pay me to shoot this. I knew it wouldn't work at all. And at that time, no one was covering Carifta swimming. They would cover track, and there was no coverage of the swimming. What we did at the time, we went to Flow Sports, and I said, if you license this from me, cover my production costs, I'm happy. I won't charge you a ridiculous price. They said, we agree on that. I said, however, you have to exclude Barbados as one of the territories. You have to exclude CBC. They said, no big deal. And the reason we excluded CBC from the deal was we wanted to give CBC the rights to play on Channel 8. Reason being, the deal you cut with CBC now was, hey, CBC, can you advertise this so we could get bums on seats inside of the aquatic center? CBC said, well, we want something as well. I said, well, we can work it like this. You can put commercials in your inventory, 1. 2, we can work out, I remember it was Diane Fort. Diane Fort wanted the t-shirts of the presenters. It was a hard one, yeah, but she twisted my arm. I gave her the rights, the t-shirts, so she put a sponsor on that. They made some money. However, the Swimming Association then got a sponsor, which put their banners all around. So it was a win for all parties. I didn't pay for the rights, but I got my money from Flow. CBC got something, they made some money. And the Swimming Association now had the visibility because sponsors don't like to come along if they're only advertising to those 100 people or 200 people within there. The key is the amount of people that are out of there that this is visible. Okay, so that was, so all the stakeholders won within that equation. However, I'll go on to road tennis. What we did another year, that was 1 year we did it that way, because I like to experiment. So what I did another year was I put some decoder boxes around the region to different stations. I gave each station a box. And rather than going to Flow, I wanted the free-to-ears to be able to get this thing. So I got someone to work with me that was involved in sports rights for years. And they told me, you know, based on per capita, whatever. There's an equation for each country, charge each one different, and we worked out the equation. Jamaica got a different price than Trinidad, St. Vincent got a different price than wherever, and I sold it to each country. I licensed it to each country, and that was another way. However, we have evolved now. I have a business partner with Co-op Cable. He's developed a hybrid box. Satellite hasn't had an upgrade in many years, and he's created an interactive aspect on it. So it stops rain fade. If there's a cloud over, eliminates that whole rain fade situation. However, the sweet part of it, it has the ability so you could put different commercials on different boxes. However, this is where our real value is. Because moving forward, no, Jamaica could see different commercials than Trinidad, Barbados could see different commercials than St. Vincent. Maximize. Because our problem before was, if Scotiabank sponsors and they're the title, you're seeing them everywhere. You cut down on your revenue. And this is how we have to be thinking in order to create revenue on these type of things. Okay, let's go to road tennis. So many years ago, the Minister of Sports came to me and said, hey, I need some help with road tennis. The first year, we know we couldn't make any money. I said, just cover the crew costs. Don't even pay equipment, nothing, just cover the crew costs. And let's see where we go with it. We had about 20,000 people online watching. We had it on CBC. Went really well. So the next year, I'm always thinking, how can we make this better? How can we improve upon this? We started to shoot out in the field. We created a scoring software for road tennis, and we tied it directly into the production, so we got all those analytics and different stuff. And we put a team onto sponsorship. And this was really interesting, because we now looked at it, and we didn't get the time we wanted to do this in advance. We were 5 months ahead, we started on this. And we went around to sponsors and we started to sell different things. We started scoreboard. It was the nation on the scoreboard. It was automotive art, the play of the match. And we got a ton of sponsors. And we just had to break it down and break out what we were able to give each. And sometimes it wasn't a hard commercial within the show. It was a different aspects of screen real estate that we could actually sell within the actual production. However, to do this, you have to be really, as soon as one tournament finishes, you start planning the next one. And that's our big problem in the Caribbean. I'd get called. 3 weeks ago, we got this tournament, though. We can get this on TV. You can't sell anything at that point. That's when it becomes really difficult. We have to start our planning long in advance, look at structures, tap into people's budgets early, and that's what we don't do. But road tennis, we looked at it so many different ways, from scoring, slow motion, or replay. We try to get better each year. We try a few things. Okay, move ahead. All right, so I'm always having ideas, and the latest one was fantasy road tennis we did. And we had people work out who's going to win, how much you're going to win by. However, this was me playing with data and analytics and trying to look at the sport in a different way. Well, we're looking at developing a vision model to work out how many backhands, and you work out that, because that's what we really need to work out the sports and coaching and everything better. However, this was just us playing with those things and testing the market. We had a good fun on the fantasy road tennis, actually. All right, let me just move ahead quickly. All right, so pay-per-view. I tested out pay-per-view, but not in sports. We did Colors of Khmer this year, and it was done pay-per-view. But that set me thinking, because in Grenada, their school sports is pay-per-view. Because they know that it has so much viewership, and if you would come in and pay $15 for it. And they do it pay-per-view. It's all ideas and different ways you can actually work, in dealing with things like this. So you can have several levels too, because even Carifta this year, Carifta Games, It was sad to know that that was signed off probably the last week before. I was trying to negotiate with them 6, 8 months before that, and it was only signed off a week before. And therefore, they can't look for sponsors within that time. We have to start seriously looking at these things a year before and properly planning them out. Okay, let me just move on. Also, a few years back, I did IFBB World Cup. First year, I wasn't involved with first year. They brought me on the second year. And the second year, we just streamed it, and it went to IFBB's website. They did it pay-per-view. Last year, we sent to Flow Sports. This year, they have Nigerian athletes on board and whatever else. I'm going to send it to Afro Sports in Africa, the largest free-to-air sports channel in Africa. And I have an affiliation with Afro Sports. We started the channel in the early days of the channel. We started during our AFCON. And the servers were here in Barbados, and I was transmitting to Africa. And we set up the whole TV station out of Barbados. Eventually it migrated over, and they started running it from there. Okay, I've actually gone through a bit of this already. We planned too late. Everyone needs time: sponsors, broadcasters, production team, advertisers, regional, international partners. Plan a year ahead. And the event day is the harvest day, is where the business is harvested. All right, so I heard the minister talk about during COVID. I remember CPL well. During COVID, it was empty stadiums. I was working with CPL. And we had empty stadiums. But you know why it worked? Because of television. Because they were able to reach markets across the globe. India, wherever else, across the Caribbean. Everyone was dying for content. Actually, COVID was a great time for us because so much cricket was playing at the time that we used to hold a show after the cricket, and we had Clive Lloyd in England on the feed, talking, analyzing the game. Barry Wilkinson would come in, and he had a number of people there. And we were doing that, my downstairs studio, transmitting wherever, to television. But we have to start taking it serious. And we have to identify, one of our problems is we have to identify between streaming and broadcast. They are two different monsters. Correct, Stephen? Right. Stream and broadcast are two different things, and we use the words very loosely in Barbados, very loosely, and we have to identify that because right now I'm working on the over 40s World Cup in Guyana in October, and the first thing when we went to international broadcast, they deal with just cricket content, and it goes, who's doing the broadcast? Because the first thing they want to know is the quality there? Is it set to a certain standard? Are the cameras positioned a certain place? So we have to get serious about what we're doing and understand a stream is not broadcast. Okay. Okay, distribution, SRT Barbados, and Barbados is a hub. Okay. For many years, I did SRT distribution. My business partner developed a SRT distribution system. We've actually changed it now. There's a new technology in the market now called RISC, much better. It protects against drop frames and everything else. However, at that time, we were doing Cricket West Indies. We were handling the servers, send it to England for the analytics to be done. We were sending it to India. India, they had all the people dealing with the fantasy. Fantasy, technically it wasn't supposed to be gambling, but you know, it's a game of knowledge. You're working out and not a game of chance. So I can't remember the companies, but we would send that signal there. It was going to England, and then we would also send it to Flow for Cricket West Indies. So we developed these cloud servers, and we did distribution everywhere. And analytics, but you know, these are things we can do because CBU used to handle all of the sports rights across the region. Then some staff left, and Sportsmats managed to get all the rights. However, Sportsmats is shut down now. So there is an opportunity in the market right now to bring together all of the stations and manage the rights. It is sad to see, what month are we in now? We're in April, and people in the Caribbean don't know who's doing the World Cup rights, World Cup football rights. That would never have happened when CBU was managing that system. They would know long in advance. Since last year, everyone would know who has the rights and where they are. All right, cool. Let's go forward. Only 4 more slides. All right, from Barbados to Africa. All right, I've talked a little bit about Afro sports earlier, and very brief on this. Yeah, we got pretty lucky here. We helped them set up a station. We told them we could manage setting up a station. We managed it remotely for a year to 2 years, and then handed it over. And last week, I was in Las Vegas. They contacted us about doing the Nigeria Premier League, the new channel they're doing with just total African soccer. And, you know, these are all technologies we can use. And maybe we have to look at a local sports channel, 100% sports, to give our athletes opportunities, make youngsters be able to see others, make them see themselves. Because, you know, our main channel can't handle everything, but it can feed into the sports channel and take the best content, take the finals, take whatever aspects they want. We have enough content, and we need to see ourselves. If Stephen is telling me Glow Sports has, what, 40,000 views, 3,000 concurrent, and 4,000 or 5,000 people down there, it's an opportunity. But we're not looking at these things, and we have to start looking at them. Vision. I shouldn't say a channel, I should say a local sports platform, because there's digital, there's, you know, TV, you know, showcase all sports, local leagues, and work alongside these associations to get their yes, exactly. And bring up the guys who stream so they could eventually become to a broadcast level, because they might never have been exposed to certain things that would happen within the broadcast world, even the commentary, and how commentary handles certain things in certain commercials and everything else. But we need to get everyone's levels up. It can't be, you know, a few down there, and then you have an international broadcast and everyone's shaking their head, because it taints the whole country. It doesn't taint one person. All right. Advertising packages, sponsorship, subscriptions, international distribution, pay-per-view. There's so many different aspects. All right. 5 questions every sports property must answer. What do we own? Live rights, streaming, highlights, archives, data, sponsorship, inventory, you know, international rights. If we cannot define the asset, we cannot price it. 2, where is the audience? Local, regional, diaspora, international, school-based, digital, or television? The audience determines the model. How can value be packaged? Separate from local, regional rights, television, from digital, create shoulder programming, highlights, pay-per-view, and territory-based advertising. How does every stakeholder win? You know, association, athletes, broadcasters, sponsor, audience must, you know, audience, all must win. If only one party wins, the model will not last. Everyone has to win. What survives after the final whistle? Content, data, archives, sponsor value, you know, audience relationships. A property that can grow the next year. If value dies when the event ends, we have staged an event, not built an industry. All right. Barbados can truly own the game. The future belongs to only those who play the game. But those who build around it And those who understand rights, distribution, technology, audience, data, and sponsorship, those who turn moments into markets. We already have the athletes, the stories, the passion, the sporting culture. What we need now is the structure, the planning, and the ambition to match it. The opportunity, jobs, revenue, identify, and explore value built through sports. Stop treating sports as only an event to be supported and start treating it as an asset to be developed. That is, that is how Barbados begins to truly own the game. And our next, our next movement forward is 246sports.com, where we're gonna try to bring together all the associations and what they're doing and everything in one platform, but we need the associations to buy into it. But this is the Minister of Sports baby, so I won't go any further into it. And that's it from me. I didn't give my earlier demo of, hold on, let's see if I have it. A minute, just a 1 minute of some of the digital short stuff. And trust me, it wouldn't play now, but that's the usual. That's still up. Hold on, let me just take down. All right. So I usually handle things like Barbados Ninja Throwdown, the IFBB World Cup. I've done many cricket tournaments, pretty much any sport event, live event. I pretty much like live events and producing live things. However, I'm also into technology, and we develop a lot of local technology that we're moving across the globe in different ways, from set-top box to everything else, so that we can enable other countries to work on projects like this easier at whatever cost. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all.
All right, thank you very much, Rivellino. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard quite a bit thus far. Madam Chair, her introduction, her welcome to you, Minister's broadening overview, and Rivellino as well too. But we're going to transition into a panel discussion. So while the moderator, who is going to be the Director of IP, Ms. Erica Smith, and the panelists, let me just introduce them to you. And I'll invite you, while the technical team readies themselves with the necessary microphones, Minister Griffith, Minister of Sport and Community Empowerment, you may take a seat, sir. Oh, you'll be directed accordingly, my apologies. Ms. Thomas, attorney at law, adjunct faculty member in the Faculty of Sport at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. Mr. Paul Skinner, Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Cricket Association. And our final esteemed panelist will be Mrs. Tamisha Rochester, the Registrar and the Officer in Charge at Business Barbados. The Director of IP, Ms. Erica Smith, will guide the discussion. I want to encourage you, as you sit, to take note of your questions that you're going to have. I'm sure we're all wondering how we are going to fit into this space, right? This is not an academic exercise where people are talking to you. You're here for a reason. I want you to think about how you fit into this, right? What are the ideas that you have? What are the things that you see? What are those hopes that you have, the vision you have for your sport? Maybe it be for your child who participates. You may be a broadcaster. You may be a professional. You may be a marketer. So I want you to begin to think. Think widely. Business Barbados, their background says start, grow, maintain, and protect. So I want you to begin to think. Give the audience, give the panelists your attention, and please note your questions, because after their presentations, we'll come back to you and allow you to ask those, to have those thoughts answered, and perhaps some of those ideas distilled a little bit. So let me introduce you to Erica Smith, Director of IP at Business Barbados.
Good evening. Is it on? Thank you for joining us. Protocol having been established, I will move into this panel. So I just wanted to say that obviously the topic is a very big one. There are lots of elements. We cannot cover everything tonight. I know as well that this question of what is IP and getting into a deep dive as far as intellectual property rights are concerned cannot be covered in this session. However, the Intellectual Property Office of Business Barbados will be hosting, let's call it a workshop, where we will do a deep dive looking at intellectual property rights, explaining what those are, and looking at, for example, how you can go through the process of applying for a trademark, etc. So today's focus is more on setting the groundwork and looking at what could be possible once we are able to effectively use intellectual property rights. I will not repeat what's been said before, which is that we do have value in sports, but we're failing to capture that value. And we have to really consider what is being lost through our failure to capture value. And a question I think about quite often is whether, in failing to have effective systems to capture value, whether we are not just subsidizing the international sports market. So there are some areas beyond IP that would support intellectual property, that would support effective commercialization. And the questions I will be putting to the panelists focus on these. So for example, policy, but also issues such as governance. And I'll start with Minister Griffith. So my first question to you is, what would success look like for the sports sector in Barbados 5 to 10 years from now in concrete terms? So how do you see or define success in 5 to 10 years for sports in Barbados?
All right, thank you for the question. Before I answer, I want to respond to my senior minister. No, not in a negative way, to support what he's saying, because you mentioned businesses in Barbados, and I'm not sure if Peter is in the room. Right. My first management meeting after Carifta, I asked Peter to send a letter to all of the business houses that sell vehicles, seeing if they can use that 4x4 team to market their product. You drive a 4x4, you know what I mean. So I think, that it is something that the marketing department should be able to do in relation to allowing that 4x4 team to market their product in the local market. So Peter would have sent off the letters. I'm hoping that we get some positive response. In relation to your question in terms of 5 to 10 years, I think that government is investing, and I am blessed as a Minister of Sports to be serving in a cabinet where the Prime Minister is so focused as well on sports. I think cost recovery is probably one of the greatest things. I have told my team this year that monetizing sports is a critical factor. Now, Senior Minister would have mentioned almost $50 million invested the last financial year in developing the infrastructure. 5, 10 years from now, I'm hoping that the cost recovery can come from all of those particular projects that we're now undertaking. By that I mean, can we market our new $4.7 million floor to Canada and the other places that are cool, where their teams can come and train at that facility? Can we use the badminton and squash facility to do similar, where we can invite individuals and teams from other countries to be involved in the process? So in 5 years' time, I'm expecting that all of the facilities that we would have invested in as a government, that we can see the benefits in terms of the payback. In addition to that, in 5-10 years' time, I'm hoping that governance as it relates to the national federations is at a level where they see developing now the athletes and their coaches as something that is not just a side thing, that we have a situation where some of the other Caribbean islands will be sending their athletes to this country to be trained in a similar way to what we do now in terms of sending athletes to Jamaica. So in 5-10 years' time, I'm hoping that the sports project on the island is developed enough that we can really monetize sports in Barbados.
Thank you. I have to be very strategic in how I hold this mic, but I have a couple of follow-on questions because we're speaking about commercialization, the commercialization of sport. But of course, sport means so much more than money, making money. There is a developmental and social aspect of sport. So as we undertake this path, a necessary path towards commercialization, how are we going to balance the developmental and social aspects of sport with that commercial drive? I'd like you to answer that, and then I'll ask one more question which is connected.
All right. So in terms of the cultural side of it, I think everyone in the room is kind of familiar with certain teams that emerge from communities. I can think of Nascimento from St. Andrew years ago. So the cultural aspect of it is important because if we're going to grow sports in this country, I think it must come from the grassroots level. And grassroots in terms of what is happening at the rural level. So if we can do that, then I think because when you have a situation that a youngster from a particular community or a team, a team is doing well, then you tend to get, in some cases, the parish, you get the community that is involved in the process. In terms of moving to the commercial level, my senior minister is constantly on about road tennis. In terms of how now do we pivot away from just having road tennis at the community level to ensuring that we can make money from our indigenous sports. How do we leverage road tennis at a level where I think Senior Minister or Riv would have mentioned selling rackets and different things in relation to making money from a sports that, is homegrown. And we're in the process of doing that to make sure that we can do that. In addition, cricket. Cricket is, almost a religion in Barbados. How do we look now to use some of those individuals, the Guyaners, Keynes, Sir Garfield, to monetize sports, to make it work for us now in a totally different way. And that is the focus now of government through my ministry.
Thank you. And the last question. So many countries, while promoting the commercialization of sport, also recognize the need for safeguards. And one tool is anti-siphoning legislation or the use of listed events, where events of national significance must be available for free-to-air broadcasts to ensure that these are not sealed behind paywalls. And we know for sure, especially in a large market like the U.S., to access rights to various sporting events, you have to subscribe to multiple services, right? It becomes expensive. So there are countries that have put safeguards in place, such as the UK, where they've said, look, there's certain events that are so important, culturally and otherwise, they must be available, or at least free-to-air television providers must have an option, a first option, to make that content available. increasingly in the Caribbean, we're seeing the rise of pay TV for sport. So do you think there is, that we should be giving consideration to these types of safeguards as well, whilst we move towards commercialization?
Yes, I fully agree with that, that maybe we should enact legislation to be able to protect us from that. But the other thing is that, you know, when entities are negotiating, I think we too should put up our firewalls to ensure that when we're sitting at the table that you don't just agree to everything that is coming at you, but then you in turn are able to say, look, these are certain things that we need to be included in the process in order to safeguard us in terms of you not just running away with the piggy bank, but we're able to do something. So oftentimes there's several individuals, entity that would come to meet and they said, well, we want to do X, Y, and Z, but this is what you have to put in the pot. And, you know, as far as possible, my team and I, we try to ensure that those firewalls to protect us from exactly what you're saying is in place. But I agree that if we need to legislate in order to make sure that is absolutely intact, I have no difficulty with that.
Yeah, so I certainly see it as something to be considered, not just for sport, but of course for cultural events as well. Okay. Right. So I'm going to thank you. We'll come back to you, but now I want to look more at governance. For us to successfully commercialize, we need to have strong sporting organizations. I can't get it right. All right, so for us to succeed, we need to have strong sporting organizations. And the issue of governance is something that is a recurring topic. So I'm going to now turn my attention to Ms. Rochester, the officer in charge of Business Barbados, and ask her some questions on this issue of governance and compliance. So how directly does weak governance and poor compliance undermine the economic potential of sport? And I'm going to just wrap a second question. Specifically, many organizations struggle with basic not-for-profit compliance. So if you could also speak to the practical steps needed to move towards operating at an acceptable minimum standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, and good evening, everyone. So I'll tackle the first question in terms of weak governance and poor compliance. And the thing is, these things have the potential to drain the economic engine of sport. And I'm saying so because sport relies a lot on investors. We have sponsorships, branding, private support, and where an investor is looking to pour into your business, your foundation, your association, and you have weak governance structures or no governance structures in place, they immediately see it as high risk. It then hinders the organizations from being able to take advantage of that sponsorship and that investorship. There's also the potential for the leakage or the misuse of funds. Where an organization is not properly managed, we can have issues such as embezzlement, corruption, fraud, and it diverts these much needed funds from the development of the sport, the development of our athletes, to misuse and to wastage. This leads to another issue, reputation. So where you have these organizations that are poorly governed, not only locally, but internationally, the reputation suffers of the entire jurisdiction. We know about some of the global and sporting scandals. We know every few years we hear about FIFA. And it is not a position where jurisdiction wants to be in. to have that level of scandal associated with the jurisdiction. It also leads to, just getting my notes, right, the loss of international participation and hosting rights. So again, it goes to the reputational damage. And usually for international participation in sport for a jurisdiction, there are certain checkboxes that have to be met, certain standards that have to be met. And if as a jurisdiction, your organization or your organizations are plagued with these types of issues, corruption, embezzlement, it then redounds to the ability of the jurisdiction to be able to take advantage of these opportunities to host globally and internationally. And then I will go to your second question, Erica. You're really testing the bounds of my memory. But in terms of what the associations can do to become compliant, and at the very basic level, they need to make sure their records are in order. Is your association registered? Is it staying up to date with its filings, its tax filings, its regulatory filings? Keeping clear financial records, maintaining records of transactions and financial statements, etc., and assigning responsibility within the organization. And I like to say compliance is not everyone's function, because when something is everyone's function, we know very often it becomes nobody's function. So there has to be somebody designated within the organization tasked with ensuring that the obligations are met, the annual filings are met, deadlines are met. So those are some of the basic requirements, and of course, taking advantage of amnesties and support. So I can say right now, for example, we have had some outreach with NPOs here in Barbados at the end of March, and we've been hosting compliance clinics for NPOs, where persons can come in and have one-on-one guidance, see what needs to be done to get them up to date, get the records up to date, and all supported with an amnesty aimed at getting these entities into compliance. So if there are any NPOs here, shameless plug, you can speak with any of our officers who are here tonight if you have not taken advantage of the support that is being offered to make that appointment to come into the clinic and to get that help, get that support, and get the organization on track.
So I'm going to pass this exam tonight. My final question to you, Registrar, is do you think we should consider having minimum governance and compliance standards as a requirement to access public funding and sponsorship? I know it's a bit ticklish, but...
Well, that's an easy question for me. The short answer is yes. And again, I spoke just now about the importance of having good governance and compliance, not only for the entities themselves and the associations, etc., but also the importance jurisdictionally. There are international standards as well that we have to adhere to, and we are judged as a jurisdiction against how we measure up to these standards. So it is not something that is there to add burden or to require entities to, have one more thing to do. But in addition to the pitfalls I mentioned previously that you're avoiding with good governance and good compliance in place, you're also supporting Barbados's efforts towards meeting its international compliance obligations.
All right. Thank you. So now we are going to move over to you, Paul. As the CEO of the BCA, you will bring a different perspective. So the first question is kind of a trick question. It's simply who owns the rights in sports in Barbados today? Is it the athlete, the federation, the event organizer, or the broadcaster? And is this ownership clearly defined through contracts? In other words, the level of formality that exists that allows for the definition of ownership.
Good night, everyone. See tonight is Paul Skinner night. Senior Minister had his first attack at cricket earlier. Thank you, sir. To answer the first question, the rights belong to everyone, and responsibilities there go across all of the categories, the athletes, the broadcasters, the federations as well. All have a part to play. What I think, based on what the minister would have said earlier, we are still in and Rivellino would have alluded to this, in embryonic stages of that. We really haven't advanced monetizing our rights as we should. From the athlete side, cricket has, I guess, because of the exposure that it's had over time, we've had a little bit more experience with that. So our cricketers do monetize some of their rights, but I also think they lose some value in what they do as well. So for example, you'll see sometimes the guys, they'll score their centuries or 50s and they'll put up their bats. They're sponsors on those bats that they're advertising. So if you're going to be an opening batsman, likely you're going to get a higher amount than somebody who's coming down at number 6, because the possibility of you scoring 50 or 100, 200, as the case may be, is a lot more possible, and therefore they're going to get the opportunity to score, to show their rights. The ICC regulates a lot of what you can do, so that's where the governance and the regulations are in place. So there are limited opportunities on your gear, your kit, that you can actually put branding. So you can sell those spots to sponsors. And depending on the brand, of course, they will monetize and value that spot depending on the batsman as well and the frequency with which they're scoring. So those who are doing well in the sport will obviously get a bit more visibility than others, and as well monetize that. Broadcasting, which is Riv's specialty there, again, CPL and those entities that have been around for a while would have had a lot more opportunities to perfect that model. Of course, Cricket West Indies, formerly WICB, would have been doing that over time. So effectively, they sell rights packages, which then are sold internationally. Throughout the Caribbean, through CBU back in the day, they would have charged each of the stations a package price to subscribe to get access to the content. I guess the Olympics and stuff are done along the same ways as well. And then the stations sell ad packages in the respective territories in which the different sponsors. So if you want to be associated with that event or have your brand featured because you figured enough eyeballs on the station at the time, of course, that will set your rate sheet and what you can charge in the particular event. Federations, so okay, BCA being one of them. We are trying something new now. We've just started streaming our elite cricket. We started a semi-professional league, and we decided to add to that package by streaming it. We're in the embryonic stages, and we have some development to do there. But again, what we want to do is get the horse out the stable. Once it's running, we can then tune up as we go along and add things. So we're constantly developing what we have to do, and there will be developments going forward, ad packages being presented so that there are opportunities within the streaming. So effectively every Saturday and this series that we're doing now, it's a three-day game, and each day it's about 5 hours worth of content that we are actually producing. One of the things we will need to tighten up on, and this is a deficiency, I think, across the region, is with regards to the contracts and what that means and the rights ownership and control thereof. Caribbean, again, as I said, the certain entities that would have been around and doing these things on a bigger scale, the CPLs and the WICB, would have contracts that can control that. We are going to get to that stage as well, where we put a lot more in place to monetize what we're doing a lot better. So at the moment we're investing, but this is also part of bringing the sport to a wider cross-section. What we are actually doing, here's the data and analytics behind it, is that we are showing what the reach is of the particular stream or enterprise that we're going into, and that in itself creates the value. So, and then by the time you segment the audiences, you can then target those things to the particular sponsors that you want to attract. The CPLs and so on of this era, that they as well, they have a fairly large audience and who they're trying to reach throughout the Caribbean. By being across multi-territories, they have that multi-reach. So companies that have branches in more than one territory get some advantages by sponsoring through those type of entities because they can reach several different audiences at the same time. So again, it's a very complex question, a lot of different facets, different ways to monetize the sport, and it goes across most sports, if not all. One of the points made earlier about the selling jerseys and so on, we are a bit, yeah, Barbados is not, and I guess it's cultural as well. If you go to Jamaica, I've attended football games there at the office, Jamaica playing an international team, USA at the time. The stadium was entirely green and yellow. Yeah, and there were people on the road lined up selling jerseys, flags, all sorts of paraphernalia, and the horrible vuvuzelas, God bless them. Not good for your ears, though, if someone's sitting behind you all. The very enthusiastic kids are the ones you have to watch for. But what it was constant is that when you got into the entity, you actually felt that Jamaican support in the stadium. Same thing happens in Trinidad. And having worked there as well, you see that the entire sea of red. Barbados has not really, we come out in our blue and our yellow, but it's not that thing where you will see 3/4 of the stadium all in one color to create that presence. Sadly, a few years ago, I tried to, and goes to the actual merchandising, try to get some merchandise to actually travel to represent Barbados, because I do go different sporting events across the world. And it was fairly difficult to get something that said Barbados. So there's a deficiency and an opportunity as well. But again, culturally, I think we just have to become a little bit more supportive of our own entity and be aware of the branding and the importance thereof. I know I've gone a little bit off track, but thank you.
All right, thank you. I want to ask you about digital platforms. So digital platforms have lowered barriers to entry, but they have increased revenue but have they increased revenue for local sports? Or are they just tools for increased exposure?
Well, with increased exposure comes the possibilities for revenue. What we have not done as great a job of is, again, putting value on it and then selling it, packaging it, such that it becomes a property that's of value to an entity. So Riv will be one of those who participates in that type of activity. He'll be one who puts the package together. I tend to, certainly with sponsors, my way of approaching it is that you know your product better than I ever will, and you will have a vision for what you want to see from your product. What I'm giving you through cricket is a vehicle to take your product along and expose it to a wider audience, perhaps a new audience. And I would marry your idea with what my knowledge of the sport to make sure you get your value out. Had an opportunity several years ago where a car was being the usual thing where they advertise a car, and positioning within a cricket field is important for visibility. The sponsor was very keen on getting the car in the shot as much as possible, but something on the boundary, only I can't control where the batsman is hitting the ball, but we do know roughly the percentage of times the ball will go in a certain area, and thus I was 100% sure if they placed it in these areas that the likelihood is that they would either get hit or be in the shot at some point as the players are running by. That would have been their goal because, of course, you said bad publicity is the best publicity. You break a windshield on a car sitting on the boundary, it's going to get featured throughout the broadcast, and everybody will know the brand name of that car. They'll never forget it.
To follow up on my final question to you, in terms of the digital environment, this is a conversation you and I had. The reality is the content is getting out there, and it may not be fully monetized by you, but someone else may grab it and monetize it. So can you talk a bit about that situation, please?
Yeah, that talks back into the rights and copyright and owning your rights and controlling thereof. We are, again, that's enforcement thereof becomes a bit of a challenge because with all the influencers and vloggers that are cutting content and deciding they're posting them, they're actually building their populace on somebody else's work at times. So I'm paying for the content, you're taking it and then you're snipping pieces out of it and putting your own spin at the end, your comments at the end, and almost making it seem that this is coming from you. That you really haven't invested anything, but you are reaping the rewards through your followers and potentially sponsors that may follow your page based on that. So it is a deficiency from our side. That comes again a bit through the contracts that you may go. Previous life there, we used to control that. We cease and desist. The same thing happens with merchandising as well. Makes it easy. People reproduce jerseys for the sports teams and they sell them. You're actually taking my intellectual property and you're monetizing it without any value back to me. The other thing that we have is the broadcast of games or any type of event being shown in the bars across the island and different public events. You're charging an entrance fee or you're using the event to attract patrons to your establishment and gaining revenue from that. But the actual person who's producing the content is not getting anything from it. There's also there's a third-party side of it, which is a slightly harder one and is not one that you really want to tap too hard. When we host an event at Kensington, any major stadium, all of those small business people on the outside selling their food, their flags, the bars that are in the immediate area who get the spillover from the game directly benefit from you hosting the event, but have not directly contributed to that event. It's a good thing for the government because there's income to be had. The minister's smiling like that. No, it does help the economy. It does inject activity in the economy, but the actual organizers of the event don't directly benefit from that. So that snow cone guy who's out there selling as the fans line up for the 2 hours before the event, he's gotten income from that. The person selling hats because it's broad hats because it's the middle of the day, they also get income from it. But again, we need the control of certainly digital side of it. We can do things on that where you then have to get an agency, most probably have to hire a company who will then track those things, and for those companies who are violating the particular rights that you have, send them the cease and desist and then be prepared to take action. We've done so before with people, certainly with merchandise, where you had suppliers who are manufacturing and producing, 500 jerseys and selling them on the street at a fraction of the cost. The problem is the potential brand damage because the quality may not be good. Somebody then takes the shirt thinking it's associated with your brand or has your logo on it, but in 2 washes, it's shrunk or the logo has been defaced. You now have a defaced logo representing your brand, and they're thinking that that is what you're selling, especially if they're trying to imitate a shirt that you are making. Some of them do their own designs, which is a little bit easier to spot, but we have had occasions where they've actually tried to duplicate the shirts, not done the quality. They won't get the quality right because they want to do it cheaper, and then actually start to affect not only your sales, but the image that you have with the quality that you want to be associated with your brand.
Well, thank you very much. Last but certainly not indicative of importance, I'm going to turn to Ms. Thomas, who's here representing the University of the West Indies. And of course, having capacity is what underlies everything else. So I'm starting with a question as to what extent is there a disconnect between academic training in sport and the practical realities of managing and commercializing sport in Barbados? And how can that gap be closed?
Well, there is a disconnect. It's real, it's documented, and it has both legal and commercial implications. Firstly, for us in the Caribbean, our programs are normally modeled of the large-scale markets, and they go on professional. They're on a professional level. So we model off those programs, but we still treat sport as a pastime. So we can't model off something that has a professional element, and then we treat what we have as a pastime. So when you look at that, there is always going to be a disconnect. I remember when I told somebody I did sports law, They said, but there's no sports law, it's just contract and IP. And they did not understand that for sports, it is different. Because a sports contract is different. An agent contract is different. A player's contract, for a player's contract, you have skilled, so you have to put in the contract, about his skill. Because he can't contract away his skill. He's the only person with that particular skill. So you need to identify and accept that sport contracts are different, right? You need to know how to look at a federation contract. How do we contract with our members in a sport federation? IP, very, very important. We're here discussing it. And I remember I always drawn the distinction, an example from Jamaica with Johan Blake when he went to, can't remember which, if it was, I think it was a World Athletics, and he wore a watch. And he didn't know that he could not wear that watch. That was ambush marketing. But we are not told about that. So it's the essence of the administrators need to be able to identify IP rights. And when you identify those IP rights, even if you're not skilled in it, you need to be able to identify so you can direct and say, all right, we need legal advice on this. How can we proceed, right? So if it is that you can't identify the IP right, then you can't protect your organization's assets. It's as simple as that, right? Then we're governed, we're governance, we have sports governance, so we have CAS. And a lot of athletes here don't know how to access CAS, right? We're governed by it, but we don't know how to access it. When you ask people...
Maybe you should explain CAS.
Right, so it's an arbitration court. It's not a regular court. They don't litigate, they arbitrate. And you have a specific time period in which to bring an appeal. All athletes who are signed on to international federations, so if you're signed on to the BFF or BCA, you have access to CAS, and you have a specific time after which a disciplinary matter has been heard to appeal to CAS. When Christopher Taylor got into problems the other day for that it was, we're about rules. A lot of people were saying, 4 years, and we tend to be very harsh on our athletes here in the Caribbean. But he appealed, and when you look at the laws that are governing us, an athlete who probably gets a 4-year ban in Barbados or Trinidad or Jamaica would get an 18-month ban in another jurisdiction. So if you know your rights, then you will know that you can appeal your sentence, because athlete shelf life are very short. So if I have to sit out a 4-year ban, it means that my career is basically done. How can we now close that particular gap? We can have programs. So we can implement programs, curriculum integration. No, I was talking to the minister earlier, and he didn't recognize that we have sports law at UWI now. We do have sports law, and it's very important because we have a lot of athletes, especially in the academy of sport. A lot of cricketers are there. And then you're beginning to understand contracts and how to maneuver contracts. Also, what is important is that sports governance. So maybe what we can do is introduce courses or diploma courses for sports law and governance, and that would cover everything.
We're talking about commercializing. I think I just have a follow-up. Thank you. So I didn't fail the exam, it was set up. But anyway, we're talking about commercializing sport, but are we putting the horse before the cart, or is it, no, the cart before the horse?
Yeah.
Do we have to look first at professionalization, or are we at a stage where we can truly move forward with commercialization? Based on capacity and so on.
Definitely putting the cart before the horse, because you have to create the framework first before you commercialize. So you have to look at professionalism before you commercial. So an athlete, for example, when we look at it in the legal terms, you want to know if he's operating under You don't want to get too legal, right? So is he operating under an employment contract? Is he an employee? So they need to know that, and your contract needs to state that, right? The federations, are they legal entities? We have several debates on whether they're statutory corporations or they operate as regular companies. And then we have to look at the commercial-oriented relationships with the parties. So we have to create, and then dispute resolution. So we have to create the framework. And the framework starts with professionalism. When we create the framework, we then move on to commercializing. So they don't run parallel, right? You start with one, and then you build and go to the next.
Okay, thank you. I asked because this is not just, the objective of this is not just to have a nice chat, but the strategy is to, based on a number of conversations, be able to present some recommendations. So I'm being very deliberate in asking that. But thank you, and I will now like to wrap up. I have a closing question for everyone, meaning that anyone can answer. So, all right, I'll make it a two-part question. In one sentence, what is the single most important reform needed in Barbadian sport? That's part A. And part B is, if we reconvene in 2 years, what should have changed? So what is the single most important reform needed in Barbadian sport? And if we reconvene in 2 years, what should have changed? I'll start with you, Ms. Minister.
You talk exam, that's a big question. The truth is that there's a lot in relation to that. I think one of the key things that we need to do is to have the population treat sports in a totally different sense. I've recently asked, and my research team to go into the school system to see what is the involvement of our students in sports. Twofold. One, for me to have accurate information, but also to share with the Ministry of Education, because I think there's a need for us to have a PE teacher in every single school. And it so happened that today, West Stars, they have the most students involved in sports in the primary setting. And the information coming from them is showing that the academics is being matched by the success that they're having in sports. So I think we need to be able to have parents understand that the sports is not just, as mentioned, a plaything. That is serious money that can be made in sports. If you look now at the NBA, a man, and the three of them, well, sorry, they're females now, who run up and down the court blowing a whistle are making about 300,000 US per year, you know, and that is just refereeing a game. So for me, I can't really tag a single thing because there's several that we need to have in place in relation to that question. But I think if we're going to broaden sports, there's a need for us to have the groundswell at the grassroots level. And hence government would have initiated the mini stadia, the lighting program, to ensure that all of our playing fields across the country and our hard courts are occupied in the evening, because there's a possibility that in a structured environment that we can discover some of the diamonds in the rough. So it really is not a single answer that I can posit for that particular question. But you know, we're doing everything possible to ensure that we can broaden the scope on island.
I think the minister started off quite well. That he gave me the ideas. It's a broad, pretty broad question. But the first thing I would say, and I meant to say earlier, is that the first thing we got to do is treat sports as a business. I don't think there's an understanding that it is a business, and most people treat it as a sport. But for us to progress, there has to be that appreciation that it is a business and we need to treat it as such. And once all facets are working in that way, I think things will get better. Minister also mentioned about the youth. The U.S. has done well over time because they have a pipeline from their junior schools into the secondary schools, which then elevates them into college and then into the professional leagues across. I think we haven't refined that system here, and our plant, as far as developing, we have the talent. There's undoubtedly the talent. Even West Indies cricketers, you could say, up to the under-19 level are competitive worldwide. Where we start to lose it after that is the separations grow. We don't have the professionalization that is necessary to carry us on to the next level. But certainly our junior talent is extremely good and competitive worldwide. Based on the limited resources we have here, we do very good for our size. Third thing is then to take after the youth. Women's sport is a huge opportunity, and that's one of my little pet loves that I want to see grow. It's been encouraging to see what has happened in the U.S. They've done, again, they're good. They've had years of experience doing these things, and it's taken them a lot of money and time to develop women's sports. I thought back, I had the same time we last met. Now, Billie Jean King played tennis years ago, and those who were around in that era would remember her as an entity. Now, you would not have thought this is women's, which you don't really think of this as, there was women's tennis and there's men's tennis, but there wasn't, it doesn't seem as if there was a big separation between the two, because she was an entity in her own right, and that's years ago. Since then, women's soccer, right, they then worked their way through the U.S., built that sport. They built men's soccer, and then they built the women's soccer, and they became an entity in their own right. And in recent years, the WNBA has grown, and that has been based primarily on stars coming out of college. Certainly last 2 or 3 years, the Caitlin Clarks and those have brought a following. They started to sell out at their schools, and as soon as they were drafted into the NBA, tickets were sold out for their games. And that's part of the whole marketing. The digital age is what brought that, because you were able to see, I could stay here in the Caribbean and know what's going on. You have it on your phones, all the posts that are coming up with these stars that are coming through. That will build your value. So you asked about where we would like to see things. That basically is developing that pipeline to develop our talent, to hone it, to understand the value that we have, and then to market that such that not only the athletes can gain value, but the federations and so on around it as well can grow such that they can become self-sustaining and be seen as viable avenues for sponsorship.
So I don't know if I can add much more to those in-depth responses from my esteemed panelists. I do agree with what was said. So we treat sport as a business. We recognize the importance of sports from the grassroots level. We recognize the importance of women's sports, but as we do that, I think we also need to bring Barbados along. So it means a change in the mindset and a shift in the culture, and it takes me back to what my co-panelist said earlier about the difference when we attend sporting events in other jurisdictions. And we need to get to the stage where we as Barbadians recognize that sport is a part of our brand. It's part of Brand Barbados. And we as the ordinary public, because I'm not an athlete, so I'll be a spectator, but we also understand the role that we play in developing sport and supporting our athletes.
Probably smiled a little bit too much when I heard the question, because my PhD is surrounded by slightly about the topic, because my take on it is the single most important reform that we need is comprehensive sport legislation. So we need a sport act. We need that because we need something that will define rights, tell you about rights, it will address governance, dispute resolution. Without legal clarity, obviously we can't benefit commercially. So unless we have that in place, we can talk all we want. We're not going to go anywhere. And if you look at all the countries who have benefited from sports and who has made money from sport, all of them have concise sports legislation. So Australia, what they did was that they have the major events and management act, and that covers every single sporting and entertainment event in Australia. The UK has several pieces of legislation. UK have safety, sporting ground safety legislation. I was doing some research on sporting ground legislation in the Caribbean. You know what I found? Not one of our organizations here have legislation that covers how a stadium is supposed, or a sports stadium is supposed to be built, or how a sport venue, right, how they are supposed to operate. I was shocked, right? Because I'm like, you know, we need to have something in place. So the legislation is definitely important. And I say Australia has it, England has it, the US has legislation, so we need it as well.
All right, well, thank you very, very much. I think it was a very informative session. I certainly learned some things. We have Mr. Moreau who will do the wrap-up, but in one sentence I would say that, you know, talent alone doesn't generate revenue magically. Systems do. And that's what we need to focus on, whether they're legislative or otherwise. We need to start really focusing on building systems. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, all right. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to our distinguished panelists. And I hope that we are all of the same opinion that this is the beginning of the conversation, right? These are experts in their own field, but one of the things I want us to recognize is we have to commit to walking forward together, right? We have expertise in individual spaces, but we need to walk forward together. We need to be able to recognize where our limitations end and the expertise of another begins. That is going to be absolutely critical. We are going to take 15 minutes of questions. I'll take that liberty to reduce your time since we've all been here so long. We'll use this microphone. We will have another, which will be floating around at the back. You will please raise your hand and someone will, 10 minutes. Oh, my apologies, that's even better. All right, so raise your hand and someone will come to you. We will take a question at the beginning, at the front first, and the panelists will respond accordingly.
Thank you to all of the speakers this evening for the enlightening interventions. Mine is more of a comment to piggyback on what the officer in charge alluded to, which is the enabling environment that has been articulated, I think, is going in the right direction. We're beginning to see those results. But my question is really, how do we identify the difference between our athletes being competitors and being champions? Who is responsible for creating that mindset shift for our athletes, and who is going to instill that so that the frameworks that we want to generate the revenue are strengthened by the athletes' confidence and belief that they really can be champions rather than only competitors?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Leacock. Look, your question is something that I have been pressing for a while. Talent identification. I mean, in almost every sphere in terms of our sports, talent identification is critical. If you look at the Prime Minister's Cup, the legacy component is the fact that we had, I think it is three or four individuals that would have moved from that competition into the professional realms. They're playing now, I think, in England or something like that. So I think self-belief is also important in terms of our athletes transitioning to the professional status. And the onus is on some of the coaches, in some cases the National Federation, to be able to identify talent and say to the athletes or the clubs, we're going to now try to hone your skills to move you to a totally different level. In some cases, it is a case where that is not done. When I came to the ministry, I asked the National Sports Council to purchase 6 cameras, because I think if we're to move forward now, we need to use the technology. So if our athletes can't go to the US for coaches to see them, then we should be able to videotape a guy on the field of play and then send that clip to the coach and say, look at this particular individual. We think that the skill sets are here that you can further develop into the professional area. So talent identification is important from the coach's perspective. It is also important from the National Federation perspective, because I think if I'm running a national federation, I need to be able to identify 1 or 2 individuals to say, look, I need for you to move around the country to look at the different divisions, because you may have potential in a lower division that the national coaches will not necessarily see. But then if you can identify those particular players, then you can earmark them for your developmental program or your national developmental program to then escalate them further. So the critical thing for me, as far as what the question you're asking, talent identification, and then how do we hone the skills of those particular athletes to move them to the next level?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think having a professional pipeline from the youth stage, identification of the talent is important, but also having that pipeline to the actual path to go from one step to the next through the system to achieve the level that we see at the end with the being of international quality. Along that path, you would have to have the specific coaches who are also good to spot the skills, identify weaknesses, and then know how to deal with them as we go through. Women's sport, I mentioned it before, there's special skills required to train ladies. What you could potentially say to a guy in sports, and which will put him back on the right track, that may totally discourage a female in sports. So specific skill sets geared to the youth, you do have to have special training to deal with the younger set. And then as we graduate through the system, dealing with the changes that come with that, and then developing the professional, that there's psychological training that goes, again, the mental mindset. And the one thing we really haven't spoke about, we spoke about sponsorship, but there's also a very big part which we're seeing more and more of, we know it's there, is the support at home, the environment in which you exist, because that's a large influence. Certainly in places like Australia, they have a culture of sport. So they understand what it is to be competitive and what it takes to go to the next level. And there's a system to take you from A, B, and C, as well in the US. And usually you hear about these soccer moms and these folks. There's a constant support system that pulls that child, male or female, through the system. In systems where you don't have access to cash, that could be limited. And there are examples here in Barbados where there's a very positive parental support mechanism around their children. You can see those athletes excelling not only in their performances, their training regime is very regimented, they become very disciplined in what they do. The additional part of that is also good academically, because they have that discipline which is required to succeed. They're well-spoken as well, which is another thing that we need to work on. They have great athletes, and sometimes a little bit of media training would help. Actually, they become salesmen. Yeah, thanks, Minister. So yeah, they're actually selling themselves when they get out there. So their performances speak for them, but then they also have to do a bit of selling on themselves. Because if I then want you to promote my brand, you must be able to articulate yourself and present yourself well, such that you can be an ambassador for the brand. So there are a few facets that will present that. It's a holistic approach. It does require some assistance from from government in what we're doing. The facilities, not all federations will be able to afford facilities to be able to do it. Some facilities are important, but it is effectively the support mechanisms around those athletes and that system, an established system to bring you from the youth level straight through to the professional level is required. The understanding of what a professional is, I don't think a lot of athletes get that. And I've had opportunities before where, you know, guys, sad to say, may invest in a car rather than invest in a gym at their home. So if I can't get out from my house in the morning, I don't feel like driving, there's a half an hour, 3/4 of an hour of traffic, I could do an hour at the gym and not have to leave my house. And professional athletes they do that sort of thing. They invest in their own personal trainers. They invest in physios, and they set up regular physio sessions to take care of the niggles that come along. They invest in a nutritionist who then sets out their meal plan so that they can achieve their goals. So all of those things, that's where you then invest in yourself. But again, you have to have that appreciation for self and what you want to do. Getting the nice things will come. You're better an athlete, you have that money will come. Also, as a sport, I mean, cricket being one, of course, I'm most familiar with, I think we're generating more millionaires or folks with that level of income than any other sport. And realizing there are a lot more T20 leagues that are coming up as well. Competition from a lot of the under-19 tournaments. Every time they come up, the world under-19s are generating.
The short answer for you is yes. Government is proactive through my ministry. We recently had the final sign-off from the lawyers in relation to what you're saying to ensure that the International Road Tennis Federation is started right here in Barbados. We need at least 50 countries to be involved in the process for it to travel, and we are currently in the process of doing that. My senior minister would have asked in cabinet for some information. That's why he said he didn't plant the question in relation to where we are at with road tennis. Hopefully by next week or the following week, that paper should be in cabinet identifying exactly where we're at in terms of moving the road tennis now from just being played on the streets here to the international level. We have several countries in Africa and Europe that are expressing an interest in having road tennis at those particular countries. So yes, the short answer, very much so.
A 24-hour local sports channel, and I know you would sort of perhaps unintentionally spoken of a 246 program there, but I would just like to loan a massive amount of support behind that. We need to highlight our youth athletes. I believe today we qualified for the Youth Beach Volleyball Worlds. Wow. We need to be highlighting the youth. So I would like to loan a huge amount of support behind that. But also, the sports that we're speaking about tonight have massive amounts of support behind them. We have a lot of small sport organizations in Barbados that do need help. And we need help in teaching us how to grow our sport. So perhaps I'm asking the government, is there any sort of program that we could have to work with small organizations to help us build?
Again, the answer to that is yes. For the first time in the history of this country, and I dare say the Caribbean, government injected $25,000 to every single national federation in this island to develop their particular sport. Some of the federations did what they were supposed to do. We hardly got any reports of feedback in relation to that. Your question about helping the small federations, one of the things that I would have started, I think, a year ago is a community coaches program. And by that, I mean that federations who are not really strong would be able to have a coaches program for you that will spread whatever it is that you're doing. So, for example, if you look at wrestling, beach wrestling in particular, we're an island. But I don't have anybody in St. John training at Bath. There's no one in St. Andrew training on the beach down the East Coast Road. So what we're looking to do is to provide coaches from St. John, St. Andrew, who could then go back to their community and be able to broaden and to expand the sport and to make it grow. So if there's a small, I know the mind games like chess and draft and those particular are not very sexy. So therefore, those participants are low. But government is prepared to work with any particular federation or any particular sport that we believe we need to grow, to inject those coaches that will then spread and make you grow to the next level. So the community coaches program is coming. We've started with football because that is the mass-based sports outside of cricket. But we are now looking to venture into other disciplines. I've asked the Sports Council to identify at least another 4 that we can start the process where you come in, you have the entry-level coaching certificate, and then you can move on further. So yes, plans are in train to do exactly what you're asking, to help those small federations.
All right. Thank you very much, Minister. I think we've exhausted our... One more comment? One more. The boss is saying one more.
Thank you. And my sport is netball. I think most persons know that. So my question is, most of you might not know that netball was actually the highest ranked team sport in Barbados for quite some time. We were ranked 12th in the world, not in the region, in the world. And our Bajan Gems are competitive to a certain extent. And when Dr. Lika asked the question about moving from a competitor to a champion, all sorts of stuff went on. I started to get butterflies, started to get nervous, you know? Because for me, there are so many challenges as it relates to our athletes. My Bajan Gems, quite a few of them, when they leave Barbados, they go on no-pay leave to play. When, you know, life happens and some of them actually need to do other things to make money in order to be able to come back and play netball again to represent our country. I just came back from Trinidad a week ago, where the stadium was painted red and black, and our team played second to Trinidad. You know, up to halftime we were competitive. As a matter of fact, at the end of the first quarter in the red and black stadium, we were up by 2. So I'm saying that we're competitive when we go there, but we need some additional help. We need legislation in place so that when our national players are going on leave, that, you know, our national players are able to go and have a peace of mind, so that when they're competing, you know, that they don't have to worry about coming back and not having a job, or coming back and don't have the finances and the resources to support their family. So for me, it is an entire culture change. It's not just about sport. It's about the businesses in Barbados recognizing our national athletes. I'm not sure if there's a question, but I needed to say this. You know, so it's an entire mindset change. It is not just about government, it's not just about the athletes, it's not just about the federations, it's about Barbados recognizing the importance of our athletes and treating them with the respect that they deserve, so that we can be competitive, we can go out there and have a peace of mind that when we come home, we're coming home as champions, because everything was put in place for us to be champions.
Can I go ahead and share? All right, so I have major difficulties with what is going on island in relation to private sector not treating our athletes our national athletes with a level of respect and pride. You heard from Nisha in relation to this. She went away managing our national netball team, came back home, and her company then was restructuring, and the only body who went home was her. So you have a situation on island where our athletes, the national ones, or individuals who function at that capacity are not respected by a whole range of individuals in the private sector. I speaking subject to correction, but you cannot go into maybe 2 business houses and see on the walls the pictures of any of our national athletes that are working within the organization, because they're not treated with that level of respect. I mentioned what I asked for with the 4x4 team because I believe that those guys did enough that the marketing people should be able to deal with it. Former MP Hinkson, now 8C, would have indicated that there is a law if you refuse to recognize our national athletes in terms of giving them time to function as our national athletes. And I think this is something that the federations need to be fully cognizant of. And then when they have problems in the same way that Ms. Cragwell was impacted, then the legal side of it should then kick in. But I agree with you. The truth is that government is pouring from a single cup, and hence we're unable to finance all of our national teams in terms of paying stipend to our players when they travel. But it should not be a case where you're going to represent country, and then you have to, as you mentioned, be playing and thinking, if I go back home in relation to my job, what is going to happen? I had a similar situation, as you remember, with one of your athletes, and I had to get involved and call a colleague minister and said, look, this particular netballer is being pressured by the supervisors that when you go to practice, it is a problem. So it is a major concern, and I would hope, I really would hope that private sector on island, especially now after the Carifta, recognize the importance of sports on this island and to treat all of our athletes with the level of respect that they deserve. I made a sacrificing, but then when they cross the finish line and they take the whole country with them, you're still getting pushback from private sector in terms of their work and what it is that they're doing for country. So I agree with you 100% that we need to engage private sector a little more for them to recognize the importance of sports. I keep hearing that government is making sports as sports, but I can't see now in 2026 how that can still be the mantra on this island in relation to, one, the level of funding that we're putting into the development of our infrastructure, and 2, the resources that we're putting behind the different disciplines in terms of training and looking to move sports to a totally different level.
I would kindly ask the media if you can ask the questions after to the individuals, please. All right. All right, very quickly, because we're very behind time.
Yeah, good evening, and I'm speaking in a private capacity. These are not the views of the sports ministry. I think we have missed the bus in the Caribbean, and I believe we have to revisit where we have come from. For example, the issue there with financing for athletes. In Barbados, we have a Barbados lottery. We play the Caribbean lottery, people daily. I believe, rather than athletes running cap in hand, I believe CARICOM governments need to, one, in Barbados, we can also have a national lottery, and in the Caribbean, we need to have a CARICOM lottery. For example, England has Camelot. And for example, going into the Olympics coming up, for this year alone, they have £150 million for elite athletes. £150 million. And we still, in 2026, have people running cap in hand, and we are not getting support or put a system or mechanism in place to fund our athletes regionally. That is a big mistake. Secondly, we need a national sports broadcaster in lieu of the void by the Caribbean Broadcasting Union and Sportsmax. The Caribbean Broadcasting Union, Dr. Leacock is here, fell flat on its face because we did not believe in ourselves. And after the Germans through the Friedrich Ebert Stifter Foundation collapsed in terms of putting money in place to fund it, it fell flat on its face. And we did not, up to now, in 2026, have not filled the void. And finally, we have the talent. We are as good as anyone in the Caribbean. I believe Mr. Skinner said that. Our problem is when we transition from regional to international level. We have producer Garfield Sobers, Brian Lara, Usain Bolt, as good as anyone in the world. But we have to go the extra mile in terms of regional, moving from regional to international competition. And we have failed, and that is where we have lost a lot of our youngsters. And I remember recently interviewing Naval Grisex from the Manchester City group. And you know what he said? He says, Peter, it's not that we don't have the talent. We have talent comparable to everyone, but we don't have the systems in place, and we don't have the self-belief to believe in ourselves. That's my comment.
All right, thank you very much to the audience. And I'll ask if the panelists can just remain. We need to get a photograph before we go. So I want to invite now Mr. Neil Murrell, whose responsibility it is to provide a synthesis of all that has gone before. Director of Sport, Neil Murrell. Excuse me, sir. After. Yeah, I'll let you know. It's okay. I'll let you know. No problem, man. They won't go anywhere. Thanks.
Thank you, Javier. I will be quick because I heard people behind me say that they're hungry, and I don't want to keep you ending on because this really was an excellent discussion under the theme "Who owns the game? Unlocking the business of sport." And I should say, and quickly say that part of the genesis of why we're here today stemmed from a creative discussion at a creative workshop at university between Erica Smith and myself, the director of intellectual property. And I will have more to say at the end on that. I think the opening fast bowlers were quite good. The opening bowler from St. James Central, we know he swings the ball around and he beat the bat today on a number of occasions. And he really did speak to where we are in sport. And I think he asks a very incisive question, or a truth really. I would call it a Yorker. He said to us that Hawaii makes $300 million from sport every year. And that is almost a rhetorical question for us. Why, as Barbadians, we are not doing the same? And a number of takeaways came. I thought Peter kind of stole my thunder, but nonetheless, the takeaways are that we are still sort of in the, I don't want to say dark ages, so to speak, but we have a number of ideas, but we are not implementing those ideas. And this forum gives an occasion for us to explore those ideas and for us to move forward. I don't want to speak generally on what we had to discuss, but we know we spoke about the fact that we need more help from the private sector. We know we spoke about the fact that government must take the lead. We spoke about the fact that education, there should be some collaboration between education, sports, and business in terms of even our curriculum going forward. We spoke about the fact that in terms of athletes have the understanding that they are important, they can be recognized as well, and the fact that they can use their recognition and so on to make monetary gain, and we are not doing that at this particular point in time. I would just say that at this particular point, the second person who came on, the other new ball bowler, he was quite effective as well, Rivellino Simmons, in terms of his feature address. He did point out that we have a weak commercial structure, and that is something that we need to work on. He spoke as well. Yeah, he was on the ball. He did speak to the fact that we planned poorly, and that is something that we as Barbadians must recognize. We need to get our planning in place. And in terms of our legislation, it is something that we need to look at. And then when we spoke even about the actionable items and where do we go from here, the panel was just simply brilliant. They're all Barbadians, and it just shows what we as Barbadians can achieve. Well, sorry. There's one Jamaican, but a Caribbean person. But again, Miss Thomas was able. Yes, we're claiming her, but she was able to bring her knowledge and experience to bear. And she spoke about legislation and safeguarding through legislation. She spoke to the fact that we need to have comprehensive sport legislation in place, which would define our rights. And she also spoke to the fact that Australia, UK, and the US have those things in place, and it supports and helps them. In terms of the actionable items, I think Peter spoke about it in his analysis. I was wondering about a broadcast and communications school. In terms of getting the information out there. The lack of information is the cause of market failure, and therefore having a school in place from perhaps I wouldn't want to say primary, but maybe the secondary level going on, to be able to understand the models that we should be looking at. In terms of the private sector, I was wondering whether through the tax structure, they can be made to come on board and assist the national federations even more. I looked at the fact that Ms. Rochester, she spoke about proper record keeping by organizations and also in terms of persons being responsible at the national federation level to make sure that the things are in place in terms of the guardrails and other actionable items needed for national associations. There need to be minimum governance and compliance standards that should be put in place, and that is well understood by all. And I would say, in terms of the private sector, the promotion of corporate social responsibility. We hear about corporate social responsibility, but I think more private sectors need to be involved in assisting the communities that they service and that they get their revenues from. More awareness within schools, within tertiary institutions and the community, that's important. And I would say one thing that came up from the panel as well, and it also came up from Ms. Rochester, the whole idea of a change in mindset, a change and a shift in mindset. And I think that is what we need in Barbados. But I will close, and persons also spoke about changing the environment as well, and collaboration between parents and so on. But I will close, as I started, with Ms. Erica Smith in her last comment. She said, talent alone does not generate revenue magically. Systems do. I leave that comment with us. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Neil. I will now invite Ms. Tamar Grant, Senior Legal Counsel here at Business Barbados, to move the vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we bring this enlightening and engaging panel discussion to a close, it is my pleasure to extend heartfelt thanks to all who contributed to the success of this evening's forum, who owns the game, unlocking the business of sport in Barbados. First, we express sincere thanks to the Honorable Kerry Simmons, Minister of Energy, Business Development and Commerce, and Senior Minister coordinating the productive sector, for his support and continued commitment to the development of business and innovation in Barbados. We also express thanks to Mr. Rivelino Simmons, Chief Executive Officer of Digital Shark, Inc., for presenting for his interesting and practical perspective on the discourse this evening. We would also like to thank our esteemed panelists, whose insights, experience, and thoughtful contributions elevated the quality of the discussion. The Honorable Charles Griffith, Minister in the Ministry of Sports and Community Development, Ms. Jadine Thomas, Attorney at Law and Adjunct Lecturer, Faculty of Sport at the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill Campus, Mr. Paul Skinner, Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Cricket Association, and Mrs. Tamisha Rochester, Registrar and Officer in Charge of Business Barbados. We also wish to acknowledge and give our appreciation to some key individuals for their contribution to assisting with this evening's proceedings. Special thanks are extended to Mrs. Linda Vasconcellos, Secretary to Minister Simmons, for her invaluable assistance, guidance, and coordination in support of this event. Mr. Glenn Clark, Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Olympic Association, Mrs. Joy Adamson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports and Community Development, though she may not be present this evening. Mr. Gregory Jones of the National Sports Council, for his human service in coordinating this forum and for his unwavering support at every turn. We gratefully acknowledge the dedication and expertise of our event sponsors and service providers, without whom this event would not have been possible. Mr. Ryan Aline and his team from VidPic Visual Media for providing streaming services, the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation for its support and coverage, Mr. Errol Clark of Intelligent Lighting for ensuring professional lighting throughout the event, Mr. Gregory Hunt, Chief Executive Officer of Base Audio, for providing high-quality sound equipment and audio services, Ms. Tashima Foster of Memories Made, whose creative vision brought this evening's decor to life, Silverline for providing the comfortable seating, and Courtyard Caterers for what I am sure will be a sumptuous and delightful fare to be enjoyed afterwards. We also wish to thank our valued institutional partners, the National Sports Council, the University of the West Indies Cape Hill Campus, the Academy of Sport, and the Sidney Martin Library, both of the University of the West Indies Cape Hill Campus. Our sincere thanks also go to Mr. Javier Reed, lecturer at the Academy of Sport, who so ably served as Master of Ceremonies and guided the program with professionalism and ease. We extend, of course, special commendation to Dr. Erica Smith, Director of the Intellectual Property Office within Business Barbados, who envisioned this forum, led her team in its execution, and expertly moderated the panel discussion. To the dedicated staff of the Intellectual Property Office of Business Barbados, our colleagues across Business Barbados, and the board of Business Barbados, we thank you for your commitment, hard work, and unwavering support in bringing this event to fruition. And finally, to you, our specially invited guests and our audience, both here and those who joined with us virtually. Thank you for your participation, engagement, and thoughtful contributions. You have truly made this a meaningful and successful forum. Thank you all, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Tamar. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time and your presence here. I will just ask that you just wait one moment before you come outside and join us to allow the photographer